So let's move on to the next point. Matt Stoller then tweets out, probably the most important policy change I worked on was an audit of the Fed's emergency lending authority in 2010. The Fed is deeply political. It's just that Fed officials and their network is hostile to democracy. Now, do they? So he said he worked on the audit of the Fed's emergency lending. You hear a lot of people say that we need to audit the Fed. Ron Paul, what does that mean, and what would be the outcome of that, and why don't they do it?
So what that means is, so right now, when the Federal Reserve, so remember, you talk about the $4.2 trillion, right, in the stimulus bill, but then there's the additional $2 trillion that was up just from the Federal Reserve to support liquidity in the financial markets. So when they talk about the Federal Reserve putting up $1 trillion, $2 trillion, any trillion to support so-called liquidity in the financial markets, that involves the Federal Reserve buying those bonds we talked about. So they're buying the corporate bonds, they're buying municipal bonds. Remember that conversation you and I had a couple of weeks ago?
Right.
And so auditing the Fed would, in essence, would be to go through the Federal Reserve and see which bonds did you buy, what's the default rate on the bonds that you paid for, and how much did you pay for them? Right? It's basically auditing who are you giving money to, and what collateral are you taking for the money you are giving.
So is there a process in place to audit that right now? Do you know?
Absolutely not. No, come on.
And so they're never
crazy.
And so that's what Ron Paul's always.
That's what Ron Paul's always talking about, which is the Federal Reserve is giving money away to everybody that they buy these bonds from, but nobody knows what they're buying, what they're paying, or what's in those bonds.
Okay, so let's move on. This brings
so if you were to audit it, you would then see and you would find things that you didn't like, and it would be offensive.
Right.
But there wouldn't be anything that you could do about it. And in the short term, as long as the dollar is the reserve currency, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, it will when it's not, though. So
That's right.
Let's move on. That's right. Let's move on to the next tweet by Matt Stoller. He says, so is there a process in place to audit that right now? Do you know?
Absolutely not. No, come on.
And so they're never
crazy.